play, and daily routines. Thank you, Katie. Big note, and I forgot.
Can you hear me?
When Katie and I were planning for this year and we talked about this, I really kind of became passionate about this last year when StarNet's grant focus took a little shift. Our focus now is really supporting children with special needs. So in your blended classrooms, in your self-contained classroom, and we know we want kids to play, but we better be intentional and we better know while they're playing, what is it we're trying to get them to learn. So this discussion today is going to talk about how we can do this. So first, just to go over some of our DEC recommended practices that I'll be focusing on today. I'm not going to read these. You can read them on your own. But again, we want to let kids play, and we want that play to be as natural as possible. But the thing that we have to remember, whether you're a first-year teacher, whether you're a veteran teacher, we have to be intentional. We either have to set up that environment, we have to have the toys that that kid has an interest in. We've got to be intentional, and we've got to set things up so that child can demonstrate knowledge. Just about what you guys were talking about in your small groups, right? All kids are inquisitive. All children want to learn. Some children just need things set up a little bit more for them. And the thing is we want that play to be natural, and we want to join in a natural way. Again, the agenda today, I'm going to talk about what NACI talks about DAP and the importance of play. I think that this is really important for us to know because, as we know, no matter what setting you're in, a lot of us get sort of backlash that our kids are just playing. And we want people to know, and we should have the knowledge and the information to share what it is that kids are learning while they're playing all day in our classroom. I'm also going to talk about using embedded instruction and our routines. Routines that we do day in and day out are an excellent opportunity for learning. Really important, how can we track those IEP objectives that our blended kids have during play? And then I'm going to give some examples of centers, and I'm going to have you guys interact with me. There you go, Vanessa. All right, welcome. Now we know who you are.
Thank you. It's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. All good. Okay, so we're going to start with a little fun. This was one of the things that Katie and I learned this summer. One of our best presentations we went to is making our adult learning joyful. So I want you to look at these pictures and think back when you were a kid. Where would you have chosen to play? Why do you think you were gravitated to this kind of play? And I actually need to pull up my chat. Hold on. Oops. I want you in the chat to tell me, but oh boy. I'm really having difficulties here, huh? I can't get my chat up.
I can watch it and read it out for you.
Okay. All right. Wow. I meant to pull it up. I'll stop. Okay. So go ahead in the chat. Why do you think you went to that area? And as an adult looking back, what do you think you learned by gravitating to that area? I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and see if I can. There's my chat. It was open. Try again. So why would you go to that area? And what do you think you learned in that area? And my chat's gone again, so Katie, help me out. Or if you'd like to unmute, go ahead and unmute.
Kevin says playground for the gross motor time because interacting with friends, playing games, etc.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, another one for outside. Oh, Mary Jo, under the table because she liked the coziness and maybe because it was more quiet. Jennifer remembers playing with cousins at the lake, fun times and social times. So that's another one we've got for the social, and another one who doesn't like the social. that was me. We've seen a good range of preferring to play by themselves and larger groups. That's interesting. Quiet area with books, more for playground. One-on-one time. That's so interesting. I think more, this is not an official poll, but I think we're seeing more who prefer some of the smaller, either solo areas or just with 1 or 2 kiddos, but then a lot for outside as well. Another valuable
Great.
thing to think about.
Wonderful. Right. So I think what we need to think about is remember this in our classrooms, right? Oh, I got my chat finally. So think about this in your classroom, right? So Katie made a little observation that a lot of you are saying maybe that one-on-one, maybe that small group. Okay. What does Eckers tell us? Eckers, the Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale, tells us that we need to have those areas for kids to play by themselves. We need to have those quiet areas. They also tell us that we need to have 20 minutes of gross motor every day. I don't want to dwell on Eckers, but I'm showing you that that's best practice. And think back to yourself, right? If you were that kid that didn't always want to play with somebody, that's why our block area should be big enough for 3 kids to play at the same time. So you could do your own thing and 2 other kids can build together if they want. So I think that this is a good thing when we sort of survey our classrooms. Let's think, what did I like? What were the needs that I had? I loved a good fort. That's why I put that up. I was a big fort person. So I probably maybe liked a little enclosed area. Again, we can't meet the needs of everybody, but we should be aware of what kids want. We want to learn kids' preferences. Okay, so NACE in their revised developmentally appropriate practice talks about, and I'm not going to read this, you can read this on your own. I don't need to read a slide to you, but we want all kids, we know this, have the right to equitable learning opportunities. And when we're talking about equitable, we're talking about all children and all types of inclusion, right? I'm not just talking about the child with an IEP, I'm talking about all the different equity we've been talking about, all different children with all different races, all different backgrounds. We need to be aware of that in our centers, our family, childcare, and in school. But the biggest thing that I will read to you is my highlighted section is that educators who engage in developmentally appropriate practice foster young children's, this is my favorite line, joyful learning, and maximize the opportunity for each and every child to achieve their full potential. Okay, so you all, we did the closing activity with Katie and my opening activity. We had joy in different areas of play. That's what we want for all kids. And we want to meet them developmentally where they are. So if somebody, when they were introducing themselves, I think was in a Head Start and has 3 children with special needs, you might be adding some younger toys for those kids, because developmentally, maybe they're doing puzzles that still have the big knob on them and only 4 pieces, but you have other kids in that Head Start that are doing 8 and 10 piece puzzles, for example. So we want to meet kids where they are developmentally, and we want that learning to be joyful. We want our classrooms to be a happy, inviting place for children. We know for decades of research that all children learn best when they're active and engaged. And I think somebody had that in their discussion. We find that activity is meaningful for children and it creates social interaction for them while they're playing. Like, look at the kid's face in this picture, right? I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl, but so engaged in what they're building. And again, this is what I'm talking about. Do you see that there's 3 other kids in this block area? This child's working by himself or herself right now. And it's meaningful. Whatever this child is doing is meaningful. And we could make plenty of learning opportunities just by looking at this picture. There's plenty of skills that a teacher could consciously be assessing while this child is involved in joyful play. Play is learning, and we know the best way for young children to learn is through this play. I can't stress it enough, and we know that. So we have very busy days. Many of you are just starting. Either it was the kids' first day or they're starting tomorrow. And I want you to remember or learn that learning begins from the minute those children are dropped off from the bus or by their parents to the minute they get back in the car or back on the bus. So routines are predictable for children. They happen at the same time every day. They should, as soon as now it's on August. So remember, kids are learning the routines. It's going to take them a while to learn the routines, but when they do, they are predictable. They happen at the same time and they're the same sequence. And this is a great learning opportunity to embed goals for a child. So go ahead in the chat box, just tell me a routine that you're planning to implement in your classroom this year. What's going to be a routine that you are going to do every single day with your children? And again, you don't have to chat. If it's easier to unmute, you can unmute. Greetings, perfect. And that's a real specific, Penny is a social worker, so that's a real specific goal-oriented routine she's going to work on. Question of the day, wish you well. Oh, what is that, Jamie? What is wish you well, if you don't mind unmuting?
Sure, it's part of conscious discipline. So we have, I can go get it off the wall if you want me to show it to you real quick.
Oh, sure. A feelings check-in, perfect. And that probably will happen every morning. Circle time, yep. Many of us have a routine within circle time. Arrival, circle time center, small group, greetings, great. Okay, so wish you were here.
Wish you well, it says we wish you well. And so when the kids come in, they have a heart with their picture and their name. And the kids that are here put their hearts on. And then if there's anybody that's absent, we put it in the middle. And there's a song we sing, we wish you well, we wish you well all through the day today. We wish you well. So
very nice. Great. I love that. Great. Okay. Arrival. Okay. Snack. Okay. Perfect. So I want you, oh, someone said lockers, right? That's like a big thing to learn their kids, just that morning routine of unzipping your bag, unpacking notes or whatever, unpacking your snack. So remember that these routines are a wonderful time to embed some learning for children. So Penny gave the example of greetings. I'm a speech pathologist. I'm just going to throw one out there. If I was working on either a specific sound a child was working on, or just increasing that child's mean length of utterances to get their sentences longer, I might say, you know what, my assistant meets this child when the mother drops the kid off and they actually have time to walk down the hall. I might try to engage this child in conversation, and when they answer me in one word, I'm going to expand the sentence for the child and to see, when we do this routine every day, do their sentences start to increase? So just again, think of those times. It's not necessarily free play and center, but these routines are a great opportunity to embed some of the children's goals into. So these are just some examples of all the routines, right? So we have play and all of this is happening. This is taken, you can see, from this project open house. When we're transitioning, that's a big thing. When we're singing songs, think specifically, what goals can I work on with a child while we're singing those songs during circle time every day, while we're singing this song about we wishing the child well that's not here. What about all these self-care routines that we have, right? We spend a lot of time teaching children how to wash their hands properly. We spend some time about what the rules are in the bathroom and what they do. Make these routines learning opportunities. Children learn best, we know, when they're interested and motivated. So, for example, any of the eating things, snack time, don't just let the children sit there and eat their snack. Think of some real specific objectives that you can be intentional and focus while they're doing these routines. The biggest thing I want to say is we have to give children the opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge, right? So if I just walked down the hall, this child's dropped off, I'm going to make something up, 5 minutes later than everybody else that gets off the bus, and my assistant has to go pick this kid up and walk this child down individually. We could walk down silently, or we could walk down and I could ask some closed questions, you know, what did you eat for breakfast? Are you happy today? Or I could have a specific objective that I'm working on. And this one-on-one time, I could get some real good documentation on this child, and not just documentation, some very good learning opportunities with this child. The thing is that I want us to use, remember, from like drop off to pick up is all learning opportunities. So let's use all of those opportunities, because as early childhood teachers, we often feel like there is so much required of me in that 2.5 hours. So let's make those opportunities useful. Any questions about routines and embedding objectives? Okay. So embedded instruction in our blended classroom. If you just Google embedded instructions, or there's a very good book called Building Blocks. I can give you the reference for that. They talk about specifically when we do embedded instruction, there's 3 things we have to plan. And I'm going to say it 1,000 times. We have to be intentional. We need to ask ourselves, what is it that I want to teach? Those are the goals that that child either has in their IEP, but I also want to talk about the children just in our preschool for all. Remember, there were qualifications that these kids met. Some of them are just environmental, but some of them also we can be watching, okay? So many of you said you do use GOLD as your assessment. That kid might not be at the widely held expectation, okay? So you're going to have some specific goals to help that child move up with their indicators. So what is it that I want to teach the child? Then I have to decide ahead of time, not during centers when I'm jumping in there with the kid, how am I going to teach it? How am I going to give the child opportunity to practice this skill? And then where am I going to teach it? Is it going to be in centers, or is it better during snack time or pick up and drop off? And then the intensity, right? How often? Because I'm going to talk about this. I think from what I was seeing when I was really focusing on this last year as I went into classrooms is sometimes we're just not giving kids enough opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge or their growth in knowledge. Not that you're a bad teacher. It's again that we're not being intentional enough. We haven't planned out that I'm going to set up the environment like this, either myself, my paraprofessional, the resource specialists that come in, the speech pathologist, OT, I'm going to let them know. And this child is going to have many opportunities to show us how they're doing on this goal that we're working on. The other point about embedded instruction is we all are going to have that child. The reason we wanted to do this is kind of to jumpstart, right? You're going to have this child as you start the routines of going to centers that either, right, wanders from center to center and never really gets engaged in play, or goes to the center and doesn't play appropriately with the toys, or goes to a center and doesn't play at all, right? Just goes to the block area and sits. So if I have this specific embedded instruction planned, no matter how that kid is playing, I'm going to be able to start helping that child play and learn. I shouldn't put quotes, but that's how we learn in early childhood. Start playing developmentally appropriately to that child. But me and the people I work with are going to know what it is we want to teach that child, how we're going to teach it, and where we're going to teach it, how often we're going to teach it. So embedded instruction kind of in a nutshell, but again, it gives the children the opportunities for them to learn and practice functional skills or a behavior across the curriculum during their daily activities. And again, let's talk about behavior because it's the beginning of the year. We know some children that maybe are demonstrating behaviors that we don't want to see in our classroom. It's not necessarily that that child is a bad child, right? It could be that they don't have the skills. I don't know how to play. You're now telling me to go to this center. Like, let's think of a child, a 3-year-old with autism coming into your classroom. I'm sure several of you have this scenario coming up, and they have not been in childcare and they've just been at home. So now you're telling me that I play with other children and I can't go get my favorite toy. I only can play with the toys that you have in this little area, right? That's going to be unknown to this child. And your idea of play and their idea of play is going to be very different. So after we take some time to observe kids as we start the center routine, we're going to see, what can I do for this child? What goal does this child need to work on? How can I teach this child to play in a more appropriate way? So even like this picture that I randomly chose, this child might have just been rolling the cups, and the teacher's demonstrating to the child how you stack the cups. These are stacking cups, and this is what you can do with stacking cups. So this last year, I don't know if anybody heard, but Erin Barton, Starnet collaborated with her, did a series on inclusion. And I thought also, to me, this was a missing link. When we're doing this embedded instruction, and I talk about the intensity, that last section, we have to keep the cycle going. Because if I just go over once and teach the child how to stack the cups, is that 3-year-old boy with autism going to stack the cups appropriately? Probably not, right? So we have to set things up. And this is the critical piece to me that I think sometimes is missing. We have to set up the antecedent. So how are we going to set things up to let the child demonstrate the behavior that we want to see? Let me get through this and then I'll go back. Once we set things up and the child can demonstrate the behavior, the consequence is us saying, you stacked 3 cups. Look, you put the big, the medium, and then the little. We're telling them what they did. Or, wow, you did it. You did it by yourself. The consequence doesn't mean I'm rewarding them with food, but we want a consequence to tell the child they did what the goal we were trying to get them to do. The thing is that this cycle has to keep going. So maybe the next day, you set it up the same way. Okay, so you want to see the child be able to stack the 3 stacking cups in the right way. But then maybe after the child does that, you're going to get some other. Do you have some stacking cubes? Are you going to just give the child 3 different blocks and see if they now know how to stack and make a tower? That was our goal, is to teach a child how to play with blocks and how to stack. We have to keep this cycle going because we all know that many children need many learning opportunities to develop the skill and to generalize this skill. So that antecedent doesn't have to be like, I have to set up 12 different things in every center. You just need to know, and we're doing this in our lesson plans. Our lesson plans, we have to individualize for children. So this would be an example of individualizing, that maybe I'm going to put out, instead of the stacking cups, now in the block center, I'm going to put out some stacking cubes, and I'm going to point them out. That, as simple as it could be, putting them out and going over there and saying, look, Katie, there's stacking cubes here today. Can you stack those? And walking away. None of this has to be like 30 minutes with an individual kid. But the biggest thing is setting up that environment. Any questions about embedded instruction and setting things up and keeping the cycle going? Okay, so the other really important thing is we all need to know the IEP goals that those blended kids in your classroom have. The IEP is their document of knowing, of learning, okay? So when I say all, not just the lead teacher, the paraprofessional, the related services that come into your classroom, everybody needs to know, what is that child working on? You need to speak to everyone. And then an IEP can be very overwhelming. So you can't focus on all the objectives at the same time. but, and I'm not sure if anybody uses this now, an activity matrix can really be a very useful tool if you're in a blended classroom and you're the teacher, or even for related services coming into your classroom. So you're going to pick a few IEP objectives to focus on for a bit of time. Oh, and these two, I'm sharing two of these matrices, and these are in your participant folder. So you're going to pick 3 objectives to focus on, 3, maybe 4. The first thing you're going to do as a team is say, where could the child demonstrate this skill? So engaging in conversation, they can do it during free play, they can do it during snack. I would say probably not circle time, because we don't give kids opportunity to just go back and forth in conversation. And in the bathroom, many times we're telling children not to talk while they're in the bathroom. Uses words to describe common objects. Again, so I don't need to go through the matrix. So now I know where these objectives can occur. So this is now where I can set up that antecedent, right? So of course, everything can happen during free play, but during snack time, taking turns playing with toys and materials. Maybe if I'm doing a group snack, maybe I do allow 4 little toys out and there's 5 kids, and I'm going to talk about sharing them or playing with them together. So I've set it up. Yes, it really does help you focus. It also helps you make sure you're addressing all objectives. So it doesn't mean that the child has to meet the objective before you move on, but it's a great way to help you collect documentation on all your objectives. So here's the other one that we have in the participants folder. Again, this now looks at just the centers where we spend that good chunk of time, right? We're spending an hour usually in centers. And I can mark down what centers can this happen in. Now, again, we don't guide a child to a certain center. Every objective really should be able to be met in every center. And it might not be, okay, so for example, identifies names and letters. Maybe in the block area, that seems a little difficult, but if I have a kid that goes to the block area all the time, my son is now home visiting, and I always talk about him, that he spent 3 years and 3 summers in a block room at a private preschool. It was like a little house, and Aaron and his friends went to that block room every day. Now, they had to bring, if this was something we were working on with Aaron and we wanted to know how many letters that he knew, for example, or he wasn't really identifying them, we got to bring letters into the block area. So are we bringing in blocks that have letters on them? Are we bringing in some paper and crayons and asking the kids to draw first what they're going to make and label it? Am I bringing in pictures of stores in the area that say Walgreens or Jewel or Meijer? And then I have the kids point out letters in a natural way. So this is, again, that antecedent, that's setting up the environment. So if you have a kid that goes to the same center every day, that's okay. You have to figure out what can you bring to that environment. Any questions about these matrices? Anybody use them? And as Anne say, I used this when I was a speech pathologist going into a classroom. Really, the IEP document gets very overwhelming. And I know even as a classroom teacher, we're not looking at it as much as we should. I'm sorry, my lighting keeps going in and out. This really helps you keep focused and make sure you're getting documentation in all areas that you should be addressing. So I can't stress this enough. We have to be prepared. In order for embedded instruction to work, if we're letting kids play and we're letting kids play with what they want to play with, we have to be prepared. Do we have the materials that we want to add to the center? Have we set up the environment? So maybe I keep talking about the block area because that's okay. My other daughter, Dana, always went to the art area. Have we moved? Okay, so we want to look at their writing, for example, but she always goes for stampers. have we maybe moved the markers where the stampers are, and to see if it was maybe because the stampers are just at eye level and that's what she sees when she goes into the art area. We've got to be prepared. Do we know how we're going to let that child demonstrate multiple times this skill? And then again, how will I take documentation? If I'm really being intentional this year and I'm really thinking about embedding goals and objectives into kids' play, how am I going to capture that documentation? Am I going to make sure I get over there with the app and I take some pictures? Am I going to have 3 Post-it notes on my hand and I'm going to make sure I get over there 3 times to see how the child is playing with the materials? Or am I just going to get over there and interact with the child 3 times during centers or 2 times during centers that day, but plan it ahead? Okay, I'm just reading the chat right now. Are these editable? Yeah, I think you can download them or just print them out. I mean, you cannot, it's nothing very fancy. It's basically a column down with the objective and either going with your whole schedule across the top or just centers. Okay, so be prepared. So what I want to do now is show you this video of somebody that is embedding play with a little boy with autism and how it really is very specific. You don't want to interrupt the child's play, right? We want to, especially, that's why I like that we're doing this now. You want to take this time at the end of August, beginning of September, and watch how the children are playing in centers. If we're going to talk about centers, what are they doing with the material? And then you're going to join in. So even if there's a child not, you know, I keep talking about a child with autism, but if they're just in the block area and they're just lining up the blocks, right? Because they like lines, or they're sorting them into colors and lining them up. That's your entryway. That's where you're starting to join the play. That's how you're going to think, how can I embed this objective into how he is playing now? But you're going to progress and scaffold the child and work to make that play more developmentally appropriate. But you're not just going to go in there and change how the child is playing. The other big thing is to bring in something that we know the child has interest in. That's a real big thing with a child that is not playing developmentally at the same developmental age level as other children. So when I was in the classroom, so I taught for several years when I first got out of grad school. I team taught with another speech pathologist, children with severe, kindergarten age children with severe speech and language disorders. And we would send a survey home to parents at the beginning of the year and ask, you know, what is your child's favorite toy? What is their favorite television show? We wanted to get all these favorites. And then we had a place to start with the children. So we started with their interests. So if I'm really, I'll keep talking about my son only because he's home. We were talking about, I mean, he was a Power Ranger boy. Not necessarily do I want to bring in Power Ranger action figures, but maybe I have some pictures, or maybe in the block area, I'm going to ask him to build a fort to protect the Power Rangers. That's going to get the child's attention rather than asking them to do something that they have no interest in. So Valerie, you've used the survey also. This is a perfect time to do it. It's nothing, you think it's nothing even to share. We created it ourselves. You think, what information could the parents give you that would be useful to use in the classroom? So let me try to show you this video. And I think this is a speech pathologist coming into the classroom. It's very short. It's a little quiet, so if you can't hear, just turn up your volume. Katie, you can see it?
This video clip shows an occupational therapist working with a boy with autism in a preschool classroom. The therapist has created a template to assist the child in building a garage with blocks.
And since we're already using visual supports to give him some options for activities, I thought maybe also offering him some visual supports for the actual building process would be helpful.
I think you're exactly right. All right, can you put them on here? Put them right on top of there. There you go.
At one of the team meetings, we actually talked through my idea of just making him some little maps that would facilitate his building. And so the teacher and I had talked about this and agreed that maybe this was a good idea to try. So I went ahead and made the maps of things that he already had choices for on his visual supports for actually choosing something to build, and I was trying to be congruent with that. And so then the next thing I wanted to do was actually go ahead and take that into the classroom and try it with him and let the teacher observe a little bit if she could, just so that we could then evaluate whether this was an intervention that was really going to be helpful to him or not, and if we needed to adapt it.
You want the too? All right. Now.
Okay, so you can see that very simple. They met him where he probably was lining up those red blocks. But what I really liked about that, A, they were already using visuals. So they knew something that worked with this child. And they were trying to, I guess the word is mold his play. So if he already was playing with those red blocks, now they're teaching him, beginning to teach him how to make a fort. And think about, yes, the teacher, what the whoever she is, speech pathologist, was one-on-one with him. But what if we developed 6 or 10 of those little play maps for him, and then he has those available, or anybody could use those, and then they start to do it independently. And would we start to see his play? Maybe would we start to see him do that without one of his visuals? So again, that's giving that child multiple opportunities. I thought that this was really great. The other thing that I loved, yes, exactly what Valerie is saying. It's interesting that he wasn't distracted by all those kids playing in that box. But right, Valerie, that's something that I assumed also. But either he's been in the class and he's been playing in centers, and that's kind of how block play is in that classroom. But look how that makes him more adaptable, if that's the thing, that he is in this classroom with other children. He's got his visual in front of him, and he's able to stay focused on what he's supposed to be building. So I thought that that was a great opportunity. She had a clear objective that she was working on. There was communication with the teacher. They decided they're going to test this out. Simple. So what I'd like you to do now, before I move on from blocks, let's look at this little boy back here behind the other 2 kids. What could you do, either unmute or chat? What would be a way to get that boy to join in with the other 2 kids? Let's just pretend or assume he's kind of sitting back from the play, and the other 3 kids are building this structure together. And our goal is to get the child to join in. What would be a way to help that boy join in with this play? Hand him a block. Exactly, Kevin. Let's give him a block and see what he does with it. Maybe ask what his favorite color is. Right. So I like that also, Valerie. Now we're not just assuming, we're going to try to get his interest, and then we're going to give him that block. Ask him what he could add to the structure. Love that, Jamie. So we're showing him that this, you can be part of this structure also. So again, I do this because, right, we're all going to have that onlooker in the beginning of the year. Can you make it bigger? Perfect. We're going to have that child that doesn't know how to join into play. Either they're an only child, their language is delayed. There's many reasons why kids don't join into play. If we give them some of those clues, oh, I love that, Anne, have another child. And that's a big thing, right? We want the peers working with peers. So I could, and here's our multiple opportunities, right? I could maybe on that first day hand them a block and talk about, look at this cool structure. You know, would you like to add this blue block? But as I plan multiple opportunities, maybe in a few weeks, I'm going to ask the kid in the orange shirt, you know, so-and-so comes to the block area every day with you, and I think he'd like to build with you. Could you ask him or give him a block to help him make your structure bigger? So all good ideas, and you guys responded pretty quickly. Again, I know it's not as easy, but if we can go into this school year looking at those kids, take this time in the beginning of the year to observe those kids that are having difficulty playing. How can you set up the environment? What kind of questions are you going to ask, or your assistant? Please use your paraprofessionals. Don't use them to monitor the snack center, okay? If you teach them how to interact with the children, if you share the embedded instruction slide that I gave you and you tell them the opportunities you want to give, they can help you a lot, okay? So use them in a constructive way. Okay, so dramatic play. First of all, I love this picture, right? We have two girls playing doctor and investigating, making sure the Tyrannosaurus Rex is okay. Talk about choices. So let's look at another girl. What about this girl in the yellow? If we want to work on some turn taking with her. So this time, would someone unmute? How could we have her take turns with the little girl in the blue?
Take away the one of the stethoscopes, so they only have one.
Perfect. Love it. Okay. So that is intentional, right? You kids love stethoscopes. So I have 2 or 3 in my centers, and we talk about that. Sometimes we talk about having multiple toys that kids like, so they don't have to fight over them. But if I know my objective and I want someone to take turns, only having one forces children to learn to take turns. Love it. Any other ideas someone would like to unmute?
I'll set a timer.
Set a timer. Okay. So we want to discuss that with the children, that you want to turn, and how will we know when your time is over? I like those big, I think Lakeshore makes those big colored sand timers that are like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, because again, that's visual and they would know. Okay. What about any kind of language to teach her how to take turns?
This is Valerie. What if you took away one of the stethoscopes, and as the instructor showed them the heartbeat, and so they can listen to, so they can use the other stethoscope and then listen to each other's heartbeat.
Okay, great. So Valerie, you're making them maybe want to share, because we're going to teach them really what, like, you're pretending to listen to the dinosaur's heartbeat. Would you guys like to take turns listening to each other's heartbeat? It will only work with this real one. Great. And then I like, Janet, you said maybe Cinderella would like to use the real stethoscope. I think when the reason I put that in there is, remember, again, it's the beginning of the year, and when we tell children you need to share, if I'm a 3-year-old only child and I've never shared a toy in my life, I do not know what share means. So whether with all young kids, we need to take the time in the beginning of the year to teach, what does share mean? Your turn, my turn, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But thank you. When embedding instruction, make sure you provide the multiple opportunities for children to demonstrate. So that's like, you guys just gave me about 4 ideas. Those are the multiple opportunities. Okay, so for several days, I might just have the real stethoscope, just one. Now I've taught the kids that only with this one can you hear the heartbeat. Kids might really be into that now. I might add this second one, and now I'm going to say, okay, you can both listen to the dinosaur's heartbeat, but if you want to listen to each other's heartbeat, you're going to have to take turns using the real one. Okay. What about in my picture over here, still a dramatic play. What about if I, one second. Oh, what about if I had a wanderer, okay? And someone came over to dramatic play, and these two girls are pretty involved in setting the table and making a meal. How could I get that wanderer to engage in their activity?
Maybe you could find out what their favorite food is, and they could share it with their friends. That's where
Okay,
that sheet comes in, their favorites.
I love that, Anne. Another thing, remember when I talked about inclusivity means all children, right? So maybe some of this food is not familiar to me. Maybe you bring in a can of Goya beans and, you safely make it so I don't cut my finger on the top. And maybe I would join in if I saw food that was familiar to me. I have a bit of a beef that I think a lot of classrooms spend a lot of money and get all this culturally including food, and there's sushi and pasta and challah bread, and kids don't know what it is, right? So don't have sushi in there if you're not going to take the time to explain what sushi is and who eats sushi, or what is this braided bread about, who eats this braided bread. So take the time to explain your food. But I like what Anne said, absolutely, kids have favorite foods. If you knew that that kid loved pizza, and we all have some pretend pizza in our dramatic play, you could have the pizza in the pizza tray, for example, out on the table, and you could invite that child to come over. And that would be a way to engage that child, but maybe they don't care about the hot dog. So I love that. Great idea. Any other ideas?
Maybe have the other child go to the art center and draw a pizza on a paper plate and bring it back and share it with his friends.
Perfect. So maybe you could engage them first at art and then bring them over to dramatic play. And now they have something to share. Love that idea. Good. So again, take the time. This is the perfect opportunity to observe your kids in this first 2 weeks of kids. Look for the wanderer. Look for the child that goes in the center and doesn't know what to do. Look for the child that's doing the same thing over and over again. Sometimes in the beginning of the year, for the whole class, I recommend a center. This is almost embedding for all children, a center walkthrough. So a couple of you said you're starting school tomorrow, that you might split your classroom with you and your assistant. The assistant's doing one thing with the kids. You go to the block area and you show the kids what's in the block area. So we all have blocks, but we also have these little cars and these little people and these little signs. You know what you can do with these little signs? Many of our kids need some scripts to start playing. When you come, what happens in dramatic play, right? They take all the food and they throw it in a pot and they throw it all over the place. When you come to dramatic play, you can set the table, and there are big red plates and there's little red plates. That's how I can see if kids can do one-to-one correspondence. That would be a natural thing. You can also make breakfast. When you make breakfast, maybe you'll take this food. You could make a special soup, and I have some pens here that you could write down the ingredients for me. There's identifying letters. So take the time to walk the kids through the centers and sort of show them what is in the centers and how they can play with the material. And I do like Katie started a bit of a discussion that it's important to remember it's okay not to share also, as long as it's done appropriately. Okay, so you don't always have to give up the material right away. Okay. So in the art area, you might be working on teaching requests. Again, think of like my little Dana that went to the art area every single day. If they want a material that another child is using, I really like this. This is my turn, your turn. 2 little discs. You glue the discs together. When it's my turn, the green, your turn is in front of you. When it is time to share the material, I give it to the other child and it's their turn. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. When it's my turn, it's red is face up. I'm learning to pass the visual disc and the material to the other child and teach them that it's their turn. Okay, Katie, I think I'm going to skip the breakout rooms, and I want to, because we only have about 15 minutes left. How do I get these turn visuals? Elizabeth, they're nothing really fancy. Just get a piece of red and green paper and cut out a circle. And I would use a thick black Sharpie and write your turn, my turn, and glue them together. So maybe do it on some cardboard, and I would laminate them. And maybe you want to have them in each center. And again, this is something in the beginning of the year, you're going to teach the children how to use these. And some children will need the visual. Other children after a while won't need the visual, but I think that's a nice way to teach children how to learn to take turns. So could somebody share with me a objective that, if this is the sensory area, an objective that you might be working on with a child that likes to go to the sensory table every day?
What about identifying, this is Valerie, identifying the different textures of what you're working,
Okay. Okay, so we have two here. Valerie talked about maybe identifying different types of textures that might be in the sensory table, or Haley said just a simple word of putting it in. Okay, so let's start. Let me just start with Haley's for now. If I'm just working on the word in, what would I need to do to set this environment up? So right now I see buckets that I can put stuff in.
Maybe a smaller bucket to scoop it up and pour it in to the bigger bucket.
Provide different scoops, right? So maybe I don't want to use my hands to put it in. Valerie's saying either smaller buckets or scoops. Yes, small objects, right? This is where it could be our favorite thing. You know, some miniature objects or something that we're talking about in the classroom. And we've told the children that in the sand table today, I hid some mini, I don't know. I don't know.
Animals, or
I hid some mini animals
letters or something.
Right. See how many you can put in a bucket. Okay. Perfect. Visuals. I love that. So maybe I have put up that day, I have some visuals that show a child putting it in so they can be reminded. And then you're a busy teacher. You can walk by that sensory table and you can just point to that visual. Okay. You don't even have to say, put it in. You're just going to point to that visual, and that could refocus the child's play. I think we've already said how you could get several opportunities, right? So you have the visual, you have scoops, you have small buckets. So maybe the child keeps taking the little bucket and pouring sand in. Maybe you go over there and you say, I found one, I found a dinosaur, I'm putting it in. Okay, and we're going to refocus the child and try to get the child to do that again. Perfect. Okay, the science area can be a tricky place for play, but I want to talk about it because a lot of learning can be in there. I think the problem that a lot of us have with our science centers is we have material there, but the children don't know what to do with the material. So you have a magnifying glass and you have little bugs, okay? So I take the magnifying glass, I look at the bug, the teacher might say it's bigger, I put it away. You need to have an activity for the children to do. So is it sink or swim, okay? Is there a chart that you tell the children, when you go to the science center today, I want you to look at the different seeds I put out there. Can you, in the tray, can you put the biggest to the smallest tray, seed? Can you vote which you think is heavier, a rock or a pebble? And I put a big chart there. Can you write your name and vote for me? Again, think of all the objectives that you're working on, and you could set that up for the activity. So if you have a child that goes to the sensory table, I'm sorry, the science center a lot, you could make the activity focus around that child's goal that you're working on. But again, in the beginning, let the children get familiar with the science center. But we often hear that kids don't go to the science center, and I think that's because we're not giving them enough to do. Oh, thank you. Elizabeth just shared a visual with us. Can you tell us a little bit about this visual? Is this your turn, my turn?
I just Googled
Oh.
my turn, your turn, and it came up on TPT. And it's a free one, so I was gonna download it later. But I thought I
Okay.
would just share it now, and if anybody else, it's a little, I mean, similar to your red and green, but I use a lot of the picture cards in my classroom, so I think this might really work with my
Perfect. Thank
kiddos.
you.
Uh-huh.
And thank you for sharing this. I want to make a comment about these. So these black and white, they call them black line drawings. For some children, it's too abstract. I don't understand that. So some children might just be at the red, green circle. Even though they're not reading the words, your turn, my turn, they're learning that red means, that example I gave you was a little backwards in my mind. To me, green should be my turn and red should be your turn. But some children might understand this if you start the year explaining this in your large group. You will see these in centers. And if someone is taking too long with something, maybe you could try the my turn card, for example. But just know, if you try this card and children aren't responding, these pictures might be too abstract for some children. Okay, let's just almost finish. Let's look at the library, and in the chat box or unmute again. How could you work with the boy in the blue shirt to get him to repeat some words? Okay. Oops. How could you get him to repeat some words from a book, maybe?
This is Kelly. I would take a book that had repeating phrases, and then I would do it a few times and then stop at the last word, before the last word.
Perfect. So again, Kelly, you have set up the environment because you're going to make sure that there's books in there, or one or two books that have repeating words. And that's going to be a natural way that I would start reading it to everybody, and I would give him an opportunity to repeat. Perfect. Take turns saying the particular word. Okay.
This is Valerie. A book that I like is Brown Bear. And that whole book repeats words.
Right. So any book with rhyme, rhythm, and repetition, you're going to get a kid to join in. And even, what if this little boy was nonverbal or selective mute? He could point to the picture, right? Because gesturing is a communication. So he might not verbally be telling me, but if I say, brown bear, what do you see? If he points to the red bird, he is participating in the objective that I'm trying to get him to do. Great. So again,
I've even made picture cards of the different animals in the story, multiple cards, depending on how large the group is. So when you get to that particular animal, whoever has that animal raises their card up.
Right. And I like that, multiple cards. Right. So I have multiple opportunity. So I think the biggest thing I wanted to make from this about the embedded opportunities is the only way it will work is if you're prepared. I got the same slide. Don't stress too much about it. What I want you to do in this beginning of the year, as I said, is take the time to observe the children. If you only have 3 children with IEPs in your classroom, I mean, we want to learn about all kids, but if this is where you want to focus, take the time to watch those kids. Now, the reason I say take the time to watch those kids, last year, I actually went to a classroom pretty early in the year, and I watched this boy, and I was like, oh, look at him. He's a roamer. He's a roamer. I need to point that out to the teacher. And after about 10 minutes, this kid, I don't remember where he went. He went over to the library, I think, and he was very involved. And when I spoke to the teacher later in the day, she told me that this is his routine. He goes from center to center. maybe it wasn't 10 minutes. It takes him about 5 to 7 minutes to warm up. But when he warms up, he's very engaged. So by observing the child, the teacher didn't waste her time where it wasn't really a skill that he needed to work on. This is what he did. He kind of checked everything out, and then he picked where he wanted to go. So take the time to observe all children. Use a matrix. Get yourself organized this year. Survey the parents. Find out what interest that child has, or that child that you really are going to focus on and want to help them engage and play and learn while they're playing. Okay? Set up the environment. It doesn't have to be complicated. Think back to when I asked you about the sensory table. You guys rambled off 4 ideas very quickly to me. Give the children opportunities. And what I want to say is sometimes it's adding more, but sometimes it's taking away, right? If I want to work on requesting with a child, sometimes I set up that environment so there's almost like a mistake, right? I tell the kids today in the art area, I've put out scissors, and if you want to cut and help me make this mosaic collage, you can, but I haven't put any scissors in the art area, okay? A simple way to get a child to request, for example. So it doesn't have to be a lot of planning, but you have to plan ahead. You have to be ready. You can't help 20 children and then quickly try to embed something. Okay, I know you can't set up for all scenarios, but if we take this time to observe, we can set up for some. So just kind of in summary, if all else fails, a couple things are: provide interesting or novel materials into the classroom that can get kids engaged or invite them to have a conversation with you. It's the beginning of the year, but you don't have to put every toy out. Consider cycling toys or materials, okay? There's no rhyme or reason. I went into a classroom where a teacher said, okay, I need you to put on your I Spy glasses, look around either in the art or the block area, and I added a new toy today. And this sparked interest with the children. But she didn't just put it in there and wait for the kids to find it. A big thing is to provide opportunity for choices for children. So let them choose between 2 things that you've maybe set up. I just talked about this sabotaging, forgetting something, not having paper on the easel, for example. You don't want to do that on the first day, but after you've taught them the routine. Adding silliness can spark some interest in a child that you maybe just can't connect to. Doing something silly, maybe you could break them from the cycle that they're in. So get creative this year, be prepared. And I'm just at the end, but a lot of you, I think, have seen this. This is for accommodations that we need to make or modifications. This scale is from Kara's kit, but they also talk about it in building blocks. Don't always go to the same thing, right? If you're having a child that you can't seem to get to, and you've tried an environmental support, meaning you've given the child a special chair, a certain chair to sit in during circle time, but you're still not really getting to that kid, think about it. Is there a certain material you can do? Can you simplify the activity? Are the requirements for that child not as much as you're requiring the other children? For example, give them a puzzle and you put in the first 3 pieces, you're only asking them to do 2 pieces of that puzzle. We talked about this, but can you use peers as your support? Every classroom is going to have a mother hen this year. Mother hens love to help out. Is there adult support? Some children do kind of gravitate towards adults. Again, we talked a lot about child preference, finding out what that child really likes. So if there's some character they like, you better get a book or a puzzle to maybe get that kid to come to that center that they don't go to. Invisible support is sort of setting up that environment for a child. So putting out a puzzle and lining up the 5 pieces right in front of the child's vision. So it's there. They don't have to get overwhelmed by dumping it and finding the pieces. Invisible support could be going out to the playground and that child just runs in circle and you kind of push a toy in front, roll a ball in front of that child. And now you can see if he'll join in playing with the ball. So don't we tend to gravitate to kind of the same adaptations we always do. Remember, there's a continuum from the most support to the least support. And we want to always work down that continuum with children. So when you're providing multiple opportunities and you're scaffolding the children, right, we want to make that support less and less. All right, so here's some quick knowledge check before I let you go. Oops, and that did not work, Katie. That was supposed to float in. But if you want to make sure you're addressing specific objectives in a child's IEP throughout the day, remember that activity matrix that we talked about. That's a real clear way. Let's see if this works. Nope, none of them worked. Okay, well, okay. When we use embedded instructions, we want to teach functional skills to children, right? I didn't talk about this, but when children are blended into a classroom and when children get related services, OT, speech, those PT, those goals and objectives that the children are working on should be functional and should help those children be successful in your classroom. So what skills do I need to be able to interact and play with the other children in the classroom? Oh, that flew in. Okay. All right. So one way to get children to ask for more, I talked a little bit about this, giving them one piece of a puzzle at a time, giving them a little more time, like sitting there with that awkward 15 seconds of silence instead of just handing the toy to the child, and have them reach, but it's out of sight. Okay, so you've moved it to the other end of the table. So again, these are all things just to think about. How can I go back to that Aaron Barton cycle? How can I set up the environment to embed my goals into the kids' play and to have them have multiple opportunities? And when I say multiple opportunities, it doesn't have to all be within one time, right? I want multiple opportunities over multiple days, or we know objectives aren't met in a day. All right, so it is 5:30 now. I want to thank everybody for signing on today. I'm going to stop sharing, and I just want to give you the opportunity, just a couple reminders since this is the first one. You got credit for the first hour of the presentation I just gave. You now are invited to stay on for an additional half hour, and I'm going to stay on. I think Katie needs to go. I'm going to stay on and answer any questions. If there's something specific you want to talk about, any questions about the upcoming webinars, whatever you would like to discuss, you will get a certificate link, a link for an evaluation tomorrow. And once you fill out that evaluation, that is how you get the certificate. So people from Region 6, you're used to getting the evaluation put into chat right now. Region 2 is doing the evaluations this year. And what they do is they now have the email of everyone that signed on today. And in your email tomorrow, you will get a link for the evaluation. So thank you for joining us. Our next one is on social emotional with Nancy Kind. If you heard her before, if you'd like to go ahead and check out. If you'd like to stay on and chat a little bit more, I'm going to stay on. So thank you all for joining us.